Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features Onslaught Epilogue. It's an X-Men special event, one issue special. The cover caption is The Path to Redemption. Obviously that bald-headed figure there on the cover is Professor X, and there's the superimposition of Onslaught over his face. So the big question for X readers, well, if it was a big question for them, was what became of Professor X after he voluntarily went into government custody with Val Cooper at the end of Adjectiveless X-Men number 57? Well, the answer lies in this special edition. And you can see here on the back cover that there's a whole blurb there about Charles Xavier, the guilt he feels over the whole Onslaught affair. Now Xavier seeks redemption in the most unlikely of places. So where did he end up? Hidden deep below the Nevada desert in a secret military installation, he will match wits against the man known only as Bastion, a man who's determined to end all mutant life on Earth and encounter a mystery that could prove even deadlier. Okay, so this special, that's also by Randy Green there. So Randy Green is the cover artist, inked by John Holdredge. And this special event one issue special, came out in, well, it's cover dated February 1997, so it came out at the end of 1996. Now, you might be wondering, who could have written this? Is it Scott Lobdell? No, it's not Scott Lobdell. So we get our creative credits here on the inside cover, and the title of the story specifically is Prisoner M13. And the creative team is Larry Hama, writer. Now, I have a hard time believing that Larry Hama came up with this story independently. It seems to me that he might have been asked by Mark Powers to write this story as a kind of like what happened to Professor X after Onslaught, rather than him coming to Mark Powers with the proposition to write this story. That's my feeling anyway. Penciler Randy Green, John Holdredge with Hilary Barta, the inkers. So John Holdredge doing most of the inking on this 32-page story. There's no adverts in here either. Richard Starkings and Comicraft on the digital lettering. Dan Mooreshead, colorist with Digital Chameleon, providing the digital color separations. So in the third-person narration, we get more exposition about Professor X, Onslaught, and then his voluntarily going into government custody. This, however, is not the penance he expected for Onslaught. Shouldn't have done that, Bastion, says somebody off panel. Prisoner M13, so Professor X is Prisoner M13, we infer, is in government custody by his own consent. So who is it that is speaking? Well, we don't exactly get to see it here by Randy Green's choice, since the two figures are in silhouette up on that gangplank. But in the speech balloon we learn who said that. Is that so, Mr. Gyrick? So it's Henry Peter Gyrick, oft times government liaison to the Avengers, but also mixed up in the whole business of the US government's response to mutants, going all the way back to Uncanny X-Men 141, where he was involved in Project Wide Awake. So Bastion says to him, "Your government has granted extraordinary power to my multinational task force. This abandoned Hulkbuster base was modified at their expense to confine dangerous individuals. I was appointed director of this installation, and as such I have the power to exercise extreme sanctions, and I've dedicated this base and all its personnel to one task: finding a way to protect Homo sapiens from Homo superior." So I'm sure that Henry Gyrick knows all of that, but we readers don't. So now we're getting the skinny on what Bastion is all about and where exactly this is. So a Hulkbuster base, that's a good use of Marvel continuity here, repurposing a Hulkbuster base for Operation Zero Tolerance. Now Gyrick asked the question that readers might be asking too, and how exactly does Prisoner M13 constitute a dangerous individual? Granted, he's the world's foremost authority on genetic mutation, but that doesn't make him a mutant. So Gyrick doesn't know that Professor X is a mutant. Moreover, he's confined to a wheelchair, for God's sakes. Are those size shields really necessary? So Bastion says to Gyrick, "There are factors beyond your ken, Gyrick." Bastion knows that Professor X was a mutant, is a mutant, because he's lost his telepathic powers in the wake of the Onslaught business. You cannot begin to comprehend. For reasons of national security, all I can tell you is that your so-called harmless scholar is in possession of vital information concerning the entity known as Onslaught. And Gyrick says, I've seen no evidence of that. And he clicks a remote there. So we get a playback from an interview session between Bastion and Professor X, where Professor X makes the sharp point, really, Bastion, this is such an obvious ploy at dehumanizing a man, reducing me to a number. So it's his confinement number, M13. M probably standing for mutant, yes. But who are the other 12 mutants in the program? So Bastion here, curious that one who is so concerned with mutants would bandy that word around so freely. Mutants aren't really human, are they? And Professor X responds, and we see the two of them glaring at each other across the table. There have been others who have used that line of reasoning for their own twisted purposes. A certain Austrian paper hanger comes to mind. So let's turn the page, see how Bastion reacts to that. Well, Professor X got under his skin, so he gets up out of his chair. Are you comparing me to Hitler, he says, simply because I know the danger the mutant race poses to humanity? Need I remind you that it was Homo superior which unleashed Onslaught upon us? So he's there pointing fingers at Professor X, showing him photographs there of the destruction wrought by Onslaught. And their debate continues. Professor X says of mutants, everything changes. If it doesn't, it stagnates and dies. So mutants are natural. But Bastion gets enraged. Don't spout your rhetoric at me, you unrepentant mutant sympathizer, he says. Grabbing Professor X by the shoulders. And then Professor X retorts, unrepentant. Good Lord, man. I will carry the horror of Onslaught's depredations with me to the grave, unlike you and your monomaniacs who would exterminate all those who are unlike themselves in the name of a perverted mission called zero tolerance. So naming the mission really gets Bastion's goat, and he strikes Professor X across the face, which knocks the professor out of his wheelchair. So this is really exaggerated action here, but let's see, turn the page. And that was Henry Peter Gyrick watching the recording on the remote. Bastion grabs the remote from Gyrick. Gyrick says, that was a bit excessive, don't you think? Yes, of course it was. What's your tone, bureaucrat? Responds Bastion. We simply guard against a telepath from the outside trying to contact him. That's the psi shield around the professor. Now give me that remote. I want to check in on the status of M9. So mutant number 9, still sleeping, he says. Is that all it ever does when it's not? So he's dehumanizing the little girl there, sleeping with her stuffed toy and watching these, they're Care Bear analogues on TV. And Gyrick says there were indications that she is capable of fooling the sensors and registering false readings. Bastion here insists it is a thing, not a she. At least some of M13's mutant friends have a tenuous claim to partial humanity, he says, unlike that abomination that was created in the Manite project. So it looks like she is a human-created mutant. That's what I garner from that. Meanwhile, Bastion's needed topside, so up he goes. This chopper is setting down, and there emerges from it a clinical psychologist, Dr. Ingrid Thiessen, and she's there to do a psych profile on Professor X. And emerging also from the chopper is this character here. We'll get his name in a moment. I like this borderless panel. Randy Green does a really good job on the helicopter there. I'm sure he's using photo reference, but he does a good job nonetheless. So Gyrick welcomes the clinical psychologist. I'm special agent, he says to her. Bastion, he's the one in charge, correct? Indubitably. So let's see. Interesting here in the background is these guys from Project Zero Tolerance on this hover platform, and they're bringing something with them, a body bag, and it's got the initials DX on it, and they dump it into the chopper. Good Lord, exclaims the psychologist. Was that a body being so unceremoniously disposed of? What is this place, she asks, as everybody marches inside and the door slams shut. Bastion says, a place that does not exist as far as the rest of the world is concerned. Remember that. Now step this way, please. So now we're getting into the business of Bastion, showing the psychologist, Professor X. He's in the maximum security level. This is your subject, he tells her. He became violent a short time ago. So, you know, like he's lying there. He was the one who became violent. What's going on here? She asks. I was told that Professor Xavier was cooperating with Val Cooper in the investigation of Onslaught. And now this guy speaks up. Well, ma'am, there are investigations and there are investigations. It appears that this one was the old-fashioned kind that hadn't even progressed to rubber hoses yet. So he knows that Professor X was knocked out by someone as part of an interrogation. He recognizes the telltale signs of that kind of carry on. And Bastion here is irked. Your bodyguard is speaking out of turn. I'm not her bodyguard, he says. Then who are you? So who is he? Let's turn the page. Well, he's got a badge. Special Operative Daryl Smith. I was the agency's top mutant hunter, but I've been out of the loop for a while. And so he's a character that Larry Hama is bringing over from Wolverine. You can see the little footnote there to Wolverine number 95. But now I'm reporting back for, he's interrupted by Bastion, and you can see how angry he is. If you value your life and freedom, you will restrain yourself from questioning my authority in the future. Do I make myself clear? And I like this little piece of dialogue from Hama where the guy says, yes, sir, I get the drift. So that's quite, I like it. I like the kind of like implication, the dryness of Smith's response. So back to business. And we have a nice anchor image of them there standing as she's looking at the security monitors. And next of all, we see a transformation of the image on the monitor to those Care Bears, the rainbow bears they are there to avoid a copyright infraction. And some kind of glitch in your system, maybe? Asks the psychologist. It's M13. He's bypassing the psi suppressor somehow. Impossible. It's far from impossible, Gyrick. That's part of a KidVid satellite feed we pipe into M9 cell. Probably nothing more than a crossed wire. Run a diagnostic, I want that confirmed. But while all that's happening outside, and the security monitor is filled with the rainbow bears, this happens. So it's M9, and she's moved through the wall of Professor X's cell, and she says to him, don't be afraid, mister. You're hurting real bad, ain't you? I can tell you now. Who are you? So she only has 3 fingers. She doesn't look 100% human indeed, and she's got superpowers. So we're going to learn a little bit more about her over the course of this special issue. So Bastion there, up on the gangplank. What's the status of that diagnostic? Is this saccharine bear nonsense a computer glitch? And somebody says it's an override, sir. Seems it's been generated out of a cell air confinement facility on the security level. So Bastion calls for a full alert. Meanwhile, the M9 gives her name. You can call me Nina, like Tuesday did. So who's Tuesday? But how? Through the wall? I call it sliding, she says. Don't be telling them I done it, okay? And Professor X says, I won't. Meanwhile, the full alert is going on. There's a reason why we're being prevented from monitoring what's going on in Xavier's cell, says Bastion. And Nina says to Professor X, Bastion got mad, huh? Don't worry, I'll clean it all up for you. So she rights his wheelchair and table. So he's figuring out you're a telekinetic as well. I can move stuff real good, she says. Where'd you come from, Nina? How did you get here? And then she's got this interesting response. Always been here. So was she created in this facility? And for what reason? And then she says Tuesday. So who is Tuesday? Tuesday said, we got found under cabbage leaves by the Project Elf. Funny, huh? Does Bastion know you can move things with your mind, child? Oh no, she says. Tuesday told me never to tell, never to let on to them what I can do. Tuesday taught me how to slide, you know. Why are you showing me what you can do? Asked Professor X, and she says, you're not like them, mister. They hurt people. I've hurt people too, Nina. That's why he turned himself in. But they're not sorry. But they're not sorry, she says. So that implies Professor X is sorry, which of course we know. He feels guilty. So he's got a better heart than the likes of Bastion, if indeed Bastion is human at all. This is my friend Harry, she says, as she introduces him to the rabbit. Will you tell, or is he a hare maybe? Will you tell us a story sometime? So, Bastion's arriving at the maximum security level. And I like this procedural detail from Hama, because Hama, even though I have a feeling this is just a paycheck for him, he's putting some thought into it. Unlike the blast doors, commands Bastion, and the guard says there's three layers of them, sir, and a polysteel iris. All of them now, demands Bastion. So we see the polysteel iris there opening as well. I like that. I like the detail and the fact that this truly is maximum security. How on earth would you get out of this? So Bastion arrives into the professor's cell. Professor there is all nonchalant. Can I help you? You're doing it somehow, aren't you? You're defeating the psi shields and sensors. Because Bastion knows Professor X's telepathy. Why the game, Bastion? Asked the professor. Why not come out and tell me what you know about me? So Bastion says, there are no games in my life, Professor. I have only one care, the survival of the human race. You'd better. And then Smith steps in, puts his hand on Bastion's shoulder, just as Bastion was about to backhand slap the professor again. I think you better cool it, sir, he says. Guards, disarm this man and confine him to a cell, as Bastion's immediate response. So Bastion, like, just one of those authoritarian types that you get as a classic villain in the Marvel Universe in particular. Authoritarian, despotic, and always demanding others do his bidding. Fairly thin in terms of his characterization, I would say. So Smith is hauled away, and he tells Bastion, have it your way. I'm real good at cooling my heels, real good at some other things too. So Bastion there narrows his eyes at that. You're up at bat, Thyssen, he says to the psychologist. I want a full psych profile on Xavier by the end of the week. And Gyrick here, coming after Bastion, says, might not be M13, Bastion. M9 is apparently capable of bypassing the psi shields as well as fooling the sensors. We're still evaluating the data on her. Bastion replies, I'm not unaware of the Manite's abilities, Agent Gyrick. This base exists in part to study its evolution. So that's revealing something about what's going on otherwise in the base. So it can eventually fulfill its purpose. But what is Nina's purpose? I want the latest assessment report on M9 tomorrow. And now we're midway through the issue. You can see there by the center staples. So 32 pages, we're halfway through. Let's continue on the next day. Thyssen, for some reason, is in this suit. And she is putting the professor through a load of tests, a gyro scanner that monitors respiration, heart rate, temperature, and 17 other functions. And then she says, let's begin with a word association test. But then she starts asking him questions. Whom do you teach? Gifted youngsters. In what manner were they gifted youngsters? I thought this was a word association test, he says. Maybe we proceed with the test proper. So let's continue. So she pulls off her headgear and she says, Professor, I realize it goes against your pedantic nature to be a testee rather than the testor, but I have my job to do. And he replies, to what end? Do you know the real purpose for this installation and what Bastion intends to do with your evaluation report on me? Do you know why I am a prisoner here, although I've never been charged or indicted? So she says to him, you voluntarily gave yourself into government custody, And we saw that in issue 57 of X-Men. I volunteered my cooperation to someone I trust, he says. That's Val Cooper, someone who probably doesn't even know where I am right now. Now, and that raises a question. So Val takes the professor into government custody, and what, she forgets about him? And she doesn't check in to see where he is being held or what's going on with him? That's kind of incredible. That's a bit of a plot hole, not for Larry Hama, but across the X line at this point. It doesn't make sense that Val wouldn't be aware of what's going on with the professor unless she's been sold a false story on what's become of him. That's my no prize answer to that one. By no means did I ask to help a man whose personal agenda is the eradication of everything I hold dear. What did you hope to achieve by giving yourself up, she asks. So he says redemption. Redemption for what? What did you do that? And then he won't tell her about his connection to Onslaught. That is information that would prove dangerous to you. So she steps on Harry the Hare. What's this? She says as she picks him up. Give me that, says the professor. That's Harry. This is something kind of comic about this. Is he trying to make her think that that's his stuffed toy? Later that night, Gyrick is always running around after Bastion in this issue. It's kind of comical in a way. So he's saying to Bastion, I've been monitoring Thiesen's sessions with Xavier, and maybe you had better take a look at the tapes, especially the ones with the rabbit. But Bastion's not listening. He says, I brought you out of base for a reason, Gyrick. We need to be out of psi range. The assessment on prisoner M9 is conclusive. The little manite is too dangerous to be allowed to reach puberty. It will have to be a DX protocol. The problem lies in executing the protocol without the target becoming aware. You and I will have to remain above ground until the matter is resolved. So this is all procedural stuff from Larry Hama. Because Nina is size sensitive, she would know what was being attempted and she would slide away. So they need some other way to do the job. I already have a solution, says Gyrick. Gyrick is just not a good guy in the Marvel Universe at all. I pulled Smith's dossier and found out why he was such a hotshot mutant hunter. It's because he's a psi anomaly himself. He's got some sort of natural psi shield that can't be penetrated by any known telepath. This is a grey area. If he's immune to psi probes, does that make him... And Bastion says, no, it most certainly does not. He's not a mutant. Have him released and give him the DX order. Tell him to do it before dawn when the next transport comes in. So, DX, destroy, destruction. So Nina visits Charlie, or Professor X again. And he tells her, I thought I told you to be careful about these visits. And she says, but I was so sad. The red man keeps thinking bad things about me. So that's Bastion, the red man, the man with all the red and angry thoughts in his head. Of course, I can't see his thoughts, but I can see Gyrick's, and Gyrick is so upset, it makes me sad. So Professor X thinks here, Bastion, if Nina can't read Bastion, it means, what, that he's not human? That he's a robot, maybe? Listen, Nina, Bastion's a very angry person, but we mustn't ever let somebody else's anger make us mad. So she says she knows that. If everybody could see thoughts like we can, they would never want to hurt nobody. It makes me so upset when I see hurt inside a person. That's why I came to see you last night, Charlie. What do you mean, Nina? About both of us being able to see thoughts? Oh, you silly, she says. You think the power went away? And he responds incredulously, it didn't? Of course not. It's just turned off. Do you want me to turn it back on? And now, look at this really horrified expression on the professor's face. No, I'm not ready, he says. I don't know if the darkness is still there inside waiting. So he's traumatized by the whole business with Onslaught. What am I going to do about you, Nina? He asks. If only I could get to a phone, then I could contact someone who could help you. So she seems to have all these unlimited type powers. So she makes this toy phone appear on the table. I meant a real phone, he says. Good Lord, could she? So apparently her toy phone now can ring out truly and really. And so who does he ring? He rings Renee Magcombe, and she listens to what he's got to say. And then we're back with Thiessen, and the rainbow bears are on the screens again. Does this mean that something has gone awry in Xavier's cell again? She asks herself rhetorically. Can't get a hold of either Gyrick or Bastion. This is my chance to get to the bottom of this. So she gets on one of those hover sleds, is what I'll call it. And meanwhile, we see Agent Smith, emerging. Time to earn your paycheck, he says to himself. So now we get a top-down shot of Xavier in his cell. There's nobody, Nina's not there, but then she comes through the wall, and Professor is upset because he wanted her to hide. And she says, she didn't have no scary thoughts in her head. So Thiessen, figures out that Nina's a telepath and she can defeat the psi shields. She can do much more than that, says the professor, and she's still a good many years away from reaching her full potential. I've given her a crash course on how to handle and control her power and the awesome responsibility she has because of it. She went into my mind to access much of the information, and I got a glimpse of the true nature of her mind. So what is the true nature of her mind? It's only implied, and she seems to be, to my thinking, a little bit analogous to Onslaught, but like an innocent and benevolent version of Onslaught. She could grow up to be that powerful, an alpha level mutant. She came to see me because she sensed I was in pain, he says to Thiessen, and she wanted to take it from me. Do you believe in the purity of empathy, Doctor? He asks her. You see before you a little person abrim with compassion, totally devoid of prevarication. Anger, aggression, jealousy, spite, avarice and pride are all quite alien to her. So this business of her being abrim with compassion and all of these desires and emotions being alien to her, she's like a bodhisattva. She's like a Buddhist type saint, like a child saint. Obviously she was created here most likely as part of some government project that has no benevolent objective. But what could it be? The question is, what purpose was she meant to fulfill? And what is our responsibility towards her? So Nina's continuing that the psychologist is not a mean person. She don't want to DX me like they done to Tuesday. So Tuesday's dead. Maybe that was the body that we saw loaded onto the helicopter at the beginning of the issue. DX, oh no. So she realizes what's intended for little Nina. So there's a security alert going on. Professor X is out of his cell and the surveillance system has been compromised. So Bastion orders that the professor be captured. So the professor's riding one of these sky sleds. This pose doesn't seem credible for a man who's supposed to be a paraplegic. But in any case, so the security guys are going after him, and Thiessen and Nina were hiding in the cell. Xavier was right. The guards went right by the cell without looking inside. So then we get a top-down shot of them running. Now, if only he can keep them all distracted long enough. So the professor there acting as a distraction, and Thiessen and Nina run right into Agent Smith. She can't teleport to a place she can't even comprehend. When Thiessen tells Nina to slide to the surface. Isn't that right, sweetie? So it looks like they're done for. Meanwhile, the professor's knocked off the sled, and he's only stunned. They're going to bring him back to his cell. The psychologist has been captured. And what about the little girl? Asks Xavier. What happened to her? But he's right back in maximum security. Now we have this DX body bag being brought out to the waiting helicopter. And Smith unzips it, and it looks like Nina's there. He says he broke her neck. That's brutal. Despite what you may think, Smith, says Bastion, I take no pleasure in this. So Smith tosses the body bag into the chopper, and off it goes. Gyrick just looking at it as it's flying away. I had doubts about you, Agent Smith, says Bastion, but you knew your duty and you executed it well. And he replies, that is affirmative, mister. If there's one thing I know, it's my duty. So, a soldier, eh? Bastion smiling there villainously. Helicopter though, we check in on it and the body bag's empty. So what's all that about? And the soldiers aboard say, our orders are to ask no questions, so let's just get on with it. Nothing happens down there without the man say so. So they're not going to dig into the empty body bag at all. 2 days later, and I like this little continuity detail. Thiessen here, she's a black eye from getting punched out by Smith. I suppose we really were under the mental control of that child. If that is what you wish to believe, Dr. Thiessen, tell me, she didn't suffer, did she? It was strange. She looked right into his eyes and she asked him, you're one of us, aren't you? Then he smiled. That's right, honey. And I'm sorry I have to do this to your pal, but it's the only way. So he bops Thiessen in the face to knock her out. And that's all I remember. That's all I remember. So Smith then is one of these government created, not mutants, but super beings, artificially constructed, just like Nina. One of us, but... And then the phone goes. That's a good little cartoon expression on Professor X's face. And who is it? It is Renee Majcom. Charles, I drove all the way out here just like you asked, and I ran into somebody out in the desert who was very hungry and thirsty and wants to speak to you. So it's Nina, and she's on the phone there. And she's put the bears on the TV so that nobody will be able to see him on the phone to her in the cell. So he asks her what happened, and she says Daryl said he was sorry he had to hit Ingrid, then he told me to stop breathing and to make my mind go dark, and he went inside my head and showed me how. He told me to wait until I felt the flying thing go up in the air, and then I should slide down to the ground and hide until somebody came for me. Daryl's nice, huh? She asks. So Professor X is shedding a little tear there, and he says, Nina, there may be others like you out there. Seek them out, help them if you can. And Nina asks Renee, how come Charlie couldn't come with us? That was the only way he could help you, Nina. You see, some people care so much about others, they're willing to sacrifice themselves. Charles is a good man and a wonderful teacher. We should learn from him. So she gets the last word. She says, I'll never forget Charlie. I just want to be like him when I grow up. Someday, me and Harry are going to turn him back on. Ain't that right? And the stuffed toy hare says, you bet, kiddo. So now we have a plot device out there for giving the professor back his telepathy, should the day come. And the day does come, indeed. So there you go. That is the Onslaught Epilogue. What became of Professor X after the end of X-Men number 57? Well, you get it here. It really isn't the most exciting of stories. It's a done in one. But yeah, it kind of reveals a little bit more about Bastion, Operation Zero Tolerance in the run-up to Operation Zero Tolerance. We're learning some things there, but also about this other side of Bastion's program, these superpowered human beings, and the little mystery about what they're for. So there you go. I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on this comic. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Did you pick this up way back at the end of 1996? Do you remember it at all? Before I did the review, I had zero memory of the contents of this. Let me know your thoughts. And if you enjoyed my review and commentary, please like and share the video. It really does help the channel. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.